Sahano Bhavatu Sahano Punaktu Sahaviryam Karvavahai Tejasvina Vadhitamastu Ma Vidvisavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May He protect us. May He sustain us. May we grow in strength together. May our study together be fruitful. And may we not hate one another. All peace, peace, peace. So, good evening. So we are in chapter 2 of the Katha Upanishad. And first, we'll read the verses that we've covered already. So the good and the pleasant are two different things. They serve different purposes. Each is, however, a bondage, though not in the same sense. He who chooses the good does good to himself, but he who chooses the pleasant misses the purpose of life. The good and the pleasant are both open to man. A wise person prefers the good after closely examining the two and weighing their merits and demerits. A short-sighted person, however, prefers the pleasant, for he is only concerned with increasing and preserving his physical comforts. O Nachiketa, I have tempted you again and again, but you have rejected everything I offered. Near and dear ones did not tempt you, not even pleasant things. You were intelligent enough to understand that all worldly things are useless. You rejected them outright. Most people, however, are steeped in worldly life because they find it pleasant. Secular learning and spiritual learning are at opposite ends of a pole. They are different and they have different purposes. This is well known. Nachiketa, I have found you intent on spiritual learning. I have tested you by offering you all kinds of attractive objects, but you have not shown the least interest in them. Those who are steeped in worldly pleasure think that they are intelligent and that they know the scriptures well. They are like blind people, being led by other blind people. They go round and round, always pursued by sorrow. There are worldly people too attached to their families. They may also be very proud of their wealth. The world mesmerizes them and they become childish. They think that the world they see around them is the only world that exists, and they do not believe that there is any other world. It therefore never occurs to them that they should perform duties preparatory to their journey to the next world. Such people come under my control again and again. It so happens that many do not have the opportunity to hear about the self. Even among those who hear, many do not grasp what it means. In reality, very few persons are competent to teach about the self, and accordingly, those who attain self-knowledge have to be very accomplished. Thus, only a handful of persons attain self-knowledge, having been taught by highly accomplished teachers. If a person with a materialistic bent of mind teaches about the self will never be understood. There are many misconceptions about the self. The right teacher is he who sees himself as Brahman. When such a teacher teaches, the disciple has no more conflicting thoughts in his mind. Otherwise, if someone by reasoning establishes the self as fine, another person in the same process can establish it as still finer. But the self cannot be known this way, by reasoning. O dearest, you have a fine insight into the self, but you have not arrived at this through reasoning. You have attained this from instructions you received from someone who did not depend upon reasoning, but studied the scriptures, and then realized the self. Nachiketa, you have truly understood the nature of the self. May we have more seekers like you. I know that wealth, as well as all fruits of work, are transitory, and you cannot attain the eternal self by using such transitory things. I knew this, yet I performed Nachiketa sacrifices and was rewarded with this position of Yama. This position is eternal, only in a relative sense. O Nachiketa, you are indeed very thoughtful. And that is why you are able to reject things that human beings desire most. For instance, you rejected whatever may be said to be the support of the world, inclusive of its human, animal, and environmental constituents. Sacrifices entitle you to many covetable things, including the status of Hiranyagarbha, the creator, supporter, and destroyer of worlds, and also lead you to regions where you are temporarily free from fear, into the acquisition of supernatural powers, such as growing or shrinking in will, influencing things to happen, controlling people, and so on, and similar covetable things. You rejected each of them because you were intelligent enough to realize that they were all perishable. Difficult to see, lying deep within everyone, hidden in the intellect, and beyond the reach of the sense organs, is the timeless self. A wise person realizing this self within himself goes beyond pleasure and pain. A person has to hear about the self from a competent teaching, but hearing is not enough. He has to attain that self. He must also establish himself firmly in that self, though the self is very subtle. That self, as Dharma, is the support of the universe. A person has to remain true to Dharma. When he knows that he is this self, he feels that he has nothing further to achieve. He is fully content. He is happy and full of bliss, and the source of bliss is his old self. I feel that Nachiketa is now fit to merge with Brahman. Nachiketa said, "It is not necessary to praise me. If you're really pleased with me, and if you think I'm fit to learn this, then please explain whatever you can about that which is beyond what the scriptures tell us to do and not to do. That which is neither a cause nor an effect, and that which is beyond the past, the present, and the future." Yama said, "That goal, which the Upanishads praise as the highest, which only austerities reveal, in which is won by those prepared to practice continence, I will briefly tell you what it is. It is Om." Praising Om and its worship, Yama said, "This Aksharam, Om, is Brahman with attributes. This Aksharam, Om, is also Brahman without attributes. He who knows this Om can get whatever he wishes. Om is the best way to attain Brahman. It is the way to attain both Brahman with attributes, Apara Brahman, and Brahman without attributes, Para Brahman. The first leads you to Brahmaloka, where you enjoy the same status as Brahma. The second leads you to union with Brahman. The self is not born, it does not die either. It is not born of something, nor is something else born of it. It is without birth, eternal, unchanging, always present. The body perishes, but the self never perishes. If the killer thinks that he is going to kill, and if the person killed thinks that he has been killed, then both of them do not know that the self does not kill and is also not killed. This self is smaller than the smallest, bigger than the biggest. It lies deep in the heart of every being, as its own self. The person who has renounced all desires and has gained full control over the mind and other sense organs can see the greatness of the self. He then becomes free from all worries. This self is motionless, yet it travels far and wide. That is, it is inactive, yet it is most active. It is both joyful and joyless. Who can understand it, except someone like me? So that's the first 21 verses, which we've covered already, and now we come to verse 22. So present in all forms, yet itself formless, The only permanent entity amidst impermanent things, great and all-pervasive, is this self. Thinking of himself as this self, a wise person goes beyond sorrow. So the praise of the self continues. There are diverse forms in this world, and the self is in each of them, but is itself formless. It is like space. The forms are many, but the self is one and the same. The underlying principle is unity and diversity. The forms are all changeable, and they perish. But the self is unchangeable, eternal, always the same. It is free, independent, and not subject to any limitation. It is both eminent and transcendent. It is in everything, but that does not exhaust it. It is also outside everything. It is like a pitcher dipped in water. There is water inside the pitcher, but there is also water outside. So this verse says that a wise person thinks of himself as the self. But the idea is not that he merely thinks, he realizes it. He has to have a direct and personal experience that he is that self. When a person has that experience, he is then liberated. That is, he becomes one with the many. The individual self merges with the cosmic self. So this is kind of the essence of the teachings of Vedanta and of the Upanishads and scriptures. Is that there's only one thing in existence, only one reality. And that one reality is Brahman. And as we mentioned before, when they talk about Brahman, they describe Sat Chit Ananda. They say it's indescribable, but the closest they can come is Sat Chit Ananda, existence, consciousness, and bliss. Now that chit, that consciousness, that is the consciousness within all beings. But when it gets connected with a particular body, a particular mind, a particular personality, it takes on a sense of individuality. And it says, oh, I'm this person. So all of us as human beings, we basically have the idea that I'm this person. And then we go through our life and we try to enjoy it, we try to experience things, we try to accomplish things, but all the time we're focused on me as this individual person. Now what we don't realize, what the ordinary person doesn't realize, is that the consciousness within him, which is saying, I exist, I'm me, this is what it's not the body and it's not the mind, it's not the personality, it's not this human being that was born a few years ago and in a few years will pass away. It's the consciousness of Brahman. And when that's understood, then the whole philosophy of Advaita, of Vedanta, it begins to make sense. As long as you're seeing the world from the human standpoint, as it appears to be, all you see is diversity. You say, I'm here, and everybody else is there, and we're all different, and some people are good, and some are bad, and some I like, some I don't like, and like that. We're seeing things, everything, as separate and small and different. But when a person goes deep within his own consciousness, and gradually gets beyond the sense, okay, I'm this body here, and he gradually gets along the sense, oh, even I'm this, not this mind here, I'm not this personality. Eventually he reaches a point where he says, I'm not this ego, I'm not this individual, I'm consciousness. At that point, then he realizes that everything is that one consciousness. So Ian, for example, in all religions, back in 1993, when we had the Parliament of Religions, the first parliament that was held here in Chicago, one of the projects they had at that time was called the Global Ethics, where they looked at all the different religions, and they just said, well, theologies are different, teachings are different, but what is their idea of ethics, of morality? And they found out it is very practically the same in all religions. And one thing they found is that in every single religion, there's a version of the golden rule of do unto others as you would have them do unto yourself. And this golden rule, this principle of do unto others as you would have them do unto you, is based upon the underlying truth that within that other person is actually the same self, the same being, the same reality that you are. Now, the more selfish a person becomes, the more he's self-centered, the more he's focused on his desires, his pleasures, his success at the expense of everybody else, the smaller his consciousness becomes. The less and less he's aware of this infinite consciousness within, and so he blocks it out. All the light is there, all the consciousness is there, but he shuts it out. And as Swami Vivekananda said, that selfishness is contraction, becoming smaller and smaller, and he said, and contraction is death. On the other hand, he said, unselfishness is expansion, and expansion is life. It's growing into your true self, and then more and more of the reality of who you are and of who everybody else begins to unfold. And so the person on the path of prayas, always seeking pleasure, always seeking the satisfaction of the body, his whole consciousness is centered on that body and what it can enjoy, what it can acquire, what it can get. But the person who follows the path of Shreyas has begun to search within, what is that that's higher than me? Now, if you study all the religions, you'll find that in all of them, there's a principle of self-surrender. A sense that there is a God there, there is a higher reality there, and it's something that's bigger than me, and religious life, or spiritual life largely means trying to do the will of that higher reality, of that God, and trying to become its instrument, its servant, its child. Now this attitude is gradually transforming us from the small egoistic individual into being more and more united with the underlying divinity, which is actually the real self within us. And this is the thing, everybody, we look out at this world and we see so many confused, unpleasant, nasty people. We read the papers, what people do to each other is just horrible. But yet in each and every one of those people, there's a wonderful spiritual being. But it's covered over. They're not aware of it. And this is why in Vedanta, the whole essence of all our problems and the solution to all our problems is the removal of ajnana, of ignorance. It's not that God is something that has to be acquired, that you do so many good deeds and eventually you get to heaven or something and you get to God, but it's simply that you're covered over with ignorance. You're unaware of who you are, of what God is, of who anybody else is, of what the reality of things is. You're totally unaware of that. And then you act. In one place, from one of the earlier verses, he said people get attracted to the external things and then they become childish. We're great, wonderful spiritual beings, but we become petty and like children squabbling. And it's actually one of the things that will tend to happen as a person starts to grow, a little developed spiritually, is that he becomes like an adult in this world. Most of the people were like children. They're fighting and squabbling and trying to grab their toys from each other. And like that, so the mother or the father, they look on and they're kind of at a higher, more mature point of view. And so they try to get peace between the children and so forth. But that's kind of what happens. And as a person starts to grow spiritually, he just sees all this squabbling and fighting and competing that's going on in the world. He sees kind of the craziness of it. And he sees all the kind of the misbehavior and things that goes on. He's becoming aware of how within that person there's this wonderful spiritual being, but yet they're behaving in this way. And this is the kind of the delusion of Maya. This is what deludes us, and then we forget who we are, and then we get so absorbed in the what we're not, and then we become ordinary human beings. So when they speak of Advaita, non-dualism, or these things, they talk about there's really just the one consciousness there. And that's actually a wonderful thing if you can start to think in those terms. It was often we have a kind of a personal concept of God. We think, okay, God is there, and I worship in this particular form. Yeah, but there's a higher thing. That worship, which is good, it eventually evolves into the realization of everything as divine. Not just one particular form or of a God in some particular heaven, but you realize that it's all divine. It's all God because there's nothing else but God. And so this is the kind of the goal. Is that, as it mentions here, that God is both eminent and transcendent. He is within the universe. He's the consciousness within each and every being in the universe. Not just men and women, but animals, the amoeba, bacteria, everything is within his consciousness, is present there. But at the same time, he's transcendent. In other words, even though his consciousness is there, giving us our individual sense of consciousness, he doesn't actually become us. He doesn't actually become the body. He's never transformed into a body or a mind or an individual. He's always in his own nature, but like a mirror, we're kind of reflecting that consciousness back. And so, I mentioned here, you know, that it's like water inside a pitcher, but also water outside. If you dip a pitcher into a lake, you've got the pitcher's full of water, but also the whole lake is there, or the whole ocean is there. It's also water. Now, each of us, we're kind of like that pitcher. We're actually filled with the divine, but as we begin to find the divinity within us, gradually we begin to discover it's the whole ocean. It's not just my personal salvation, my personal journey to heaven. It's really the whole infinite ocean is there. And that's what I am. That's what each and every person is. As long as you're saying, though, that I personally, that's what I am, you won't get it. Because you're still kind of holding on to that individual, the small individual self. It's only when you completely can kind of let go of that through self-surrender, through your moral virtues, your practice and so forth, as you can kind of let go of this focus on ego, on our own personal, individual existence, then this whole infinite ocean of consciousness, of bliss, of existence can be revealed to you. And this is the only way you actually can know Vedanta. You know, the only way you can actually know what God is. You can't get it through books, you can't get it through lectures. You can be a wonderful scholar, great scholar, but all you've got are ideas about God, concepts within your mind about God. But the only way you can actually know God is when God becomes an actual experience. It becomes your actual reality of your being. That true spiritual knowledge is something that opens up, begins to reveal itself from within as you make contact with that inner presence. And then you begin to understand what God truly is. The books, like we mentioned before, the books of scriptural study, they're all very important. They have their place because it's like if you want to make a journey, get from one place to another, you have to look at the map. You have to study the map and figure out where do I want to go, how do I get there. But reading the map, it doesn't take you any closer. You know? But it's at least you're clear now. Oh, if I want to get there, this is how I do it. But there'll come a point in your study of scriptures when you realize that basically I know everything I need to know. But now I've got to do it. And that's the only way to actually know what God is that when that consciousness begins to kind of penetrate into your consciousness. So this world, the underlying principle of this world, I think Swami Varadananda, he used, is quite often unity and diversity. We see diversity, we see the world as diversity, all kinds of different peoples, all kinds of different qualities, And like I said, and we react. Generally, we react to the diversity, good people and bad people and so forth. But when you can begin to realize the unity that underlies that, the one consciousness that's there, then it becomes a tremendous transforming experience. As an individual, you can become a very good person. You can become very unselfish, very helpful, very loving, very kind. But what you become when you become aware that, oh, the self that's here, the consciousness is here, that very same self is there, then it becomes a completely different thing. It's not you with your good qualities, your virtues and so forth. It's not you kind of giving kindness to somebody. It's the one self, the one consciousness flowing through you, flowing through him, flowing through her, and like that, all interacting. So it gives a completely different kind of vision of things. Sri Ramakrishna used to call this Vivekananda. He said that the jnani, the follower of the path of knowledge, he said that he generally in the path of jnana yoga knowledge, they follow the path of neti, not this, not this. God isn't this, God isn't that, God isn't that, like that. Examining each level of experience and say, no, this isn't God. But he said, it's like going to the roof, taking one step at a time, going higher and higher. But he said, when the person reaches the roof, then he discovers that it's made out of the same bricks and mortar as the stairs were. And then he realizes that this ultimate reality, this true reality of things, this Brahman that he discovers there, that same Brahman is also everywhere and in everything. So in other words, we can become, like I said, a good person, virtuous person, what they call sattvic person, and we can be very happy. And we can give some happiness to other people and so forth. But when we attain oneness with that Brahman, that consciousness which is our real self, then we become transformed into something completely different. We're no longer a small human with small limited human powers. It's now the divinity of God flowing through us, shining through us. So in kind of spiritual practice, spiritual life, this is goal is to have periods of meditation, like in the morning, in the evening, you know. And the idea is that in your meditation, you shut your eyes to the world. You close your eyes, you forget all about the world, all about your problems, your worries, and all about your kind of personal affairs, and you try to get that inner connection. Now, if you attain even a little bit of that connection, then as you come out of that, once you open your eyes, you come out and you see the world again and you get involved in the world again, you now have a blessed day. You now find that there's this higher presence that's taking care of you, that's making things unfold for you. And you become a source of blessing to everybody else. Because as you get light, it shines. You don't have to do it, you don't have to make it shine, it will shine and everybody else gets uplifted by that. And so this is really the true kind of spiritual living, is that you have to let go of the world for a while, step out of it, and see what happens is a lot of people, I think most of us, when we sit and first start trying to meditate and all, we generally bring all our problems into it. So, God, please solve this problem, what about that? And we bring the same worry and stress and things that we have the rest of the day, and then we try to get an answer or something in prayer. You know, one devotee out in Hollywood Center, in Swami Varadananda's time, he owned a company that they built helicopters. And so, one time, he told Swami Varadananda what a wonderful thing meditation was. Because every time he meditated, he got great ideas on how to build helicopters. so like that, most people, we take our kind of ordinary life into it, but what you need to do is to let go of all your everyday concerns and just try to be in the presence of God. In the temple of Jerusalem, you know, the famous, they had an inner sanctum where nobody except the high priest, the very high priest, could go. and there was like a secret word, kind of secret password to that, and I read that password was actually I am. Yeah, this is, in other words, I am. Instead of saying I'm here, a little human being, and God is here, somewhere in heaven or somewhere, it says that what God is, that same consciousness, that's what I am. Now the only way to achieve that is when you let go of that consciousness grabbing hold, the body, mind, and ego, and personal self. It opens up so that that consciousness can come into your experience, and then you get the transforming benefit. Otherwise, religion is often a matter of rules and regulations, do this, don't do that, and so forth, which are guidance and so forth. But the benefit of religion, the real benefit, comes only as this divinity begins to unfold within our own consciousness. So all the forms of the world is made up of forms, all kinds of different natures and all, but pervading all of them, within all of them, is the one eternal consciousness, the one eternal self. The forms all come and go, like they're like waves in the ocean. A wave comes and then it goes, but the ocean is always there and always will be there. So our particular embodiment now, our particular wave now, it will come and eventually it will go. But what we are, the thing that's saying, you know, that this is me, it will become, always be there. It's hard to conceive for most people. Most people tend to think, oh, death, that means, oh, I'm lost. But actually, it's, it just means that as it says in Gita, it's like taking off an old shirt. A shirt gets worn and torn, so you throw it off and you put on a new one. He said like that, people, when the body gets old or worn out, when it served its purpose, then people cash out and then they take on a new one. And it's, like I said, when our sense of identity is based on the body, then that's a very difficult thing, a very frightening thing to think about. But it's interesting that, you know, there's been a lot of interest recently in near-death experiences. You know, and this is, you know, the famous book, Life After Life by Raymond Moody. His first kind of recorded accounts of people who like, almost got to the brink of death, but then they came back from the experience. And some they got like a little glimpse on the other side. Now, invariably, once a person had this experience, they lost all fear of death. They go, oh, that's not the end of me, you know. And that's actually a very wonderful thing. So there, those who have reached like seeing the light or things like that, they realize, oh, there's a whole much more to this universe and much more to me than I thought. And I think we may have mentioned last class or so that one of the most common experiences that people have is what's called out-of-body experiences. And this frequently when a person's on the operating table, you know, and then suddenly they find themselves like up around the ceiling. And they look at and they see the body is there on the table. At that point, that body is just an object to them, like that chair. Their consciousness, their sense of identity, their sense of this is me, it is not at all connected with that body anymore. The body is just a completely separate object, and it knows the thing within us that says, this is me, this I exist, you know, that thing is there. Now right now that thing within us is generally saying that I'm here because this body is here. I'm alive because this body is alive. I am this body. But in fact, we're not the body at all. And when you become a little separate from the body, you start to move up, then you begin to open up to your inner consciousness, which is something much bigger than just physical existence. So this is, like I said, it's very difficult for most people to understand or to appreciate, because most people, a great majority of us, we have this strong sense that this is me, this body is me, this personality, this individual, this is me. And trying to get beyond that is very difficult. We don't realize that grabbing hold intensely of the kind of individual existence is what prevents us from growing into our true kind of self. And so, like I said, the path of prayers, that grabbing on the body, that becomes stronger and stronger and stronger. And you become, then your consciousness becomes more and more physical. Whereas as you begin to kind of withdraw from that and begin to search for the higher truth, or as you begin to develop devotion to God, devotion to something higher than yourself, then you're gradually beginning to move back into the presence that's there within. And eventually, a person reaches the point where that presence, that infinite divine presence, becomes reality for him. Swami Varadananda, in his book Meditation and his practices, said that how in the beginning of a person's sadhana, his spiritual practice, that this world, the physical world, is very real, very concrete to him, and God is something vague and abstract, like a dream. But he said as a person goes on thinking about God, he eventually reaches a point where he's thinking about God more than he's thinking about the world. And at that point, he said, it's like he crosses over a threshold. And now suddenly God's Spirit, these are reality to him. These are a living reality. And then the world, the physical world, it seems vague and unreal. It's shadowy, like a dream. And so this is, but it's like I said, the great majority of people, that's very difficult to understand or to appreciate. And so most people, we have to go kind of little step by little step by little step. And slowly we get a little better, a little less selfish, a little less focused on our egos and so forth. And gradually we're getting, this whole universe is gradually we're getting refined until we again get reunited with God. So then we come to verse 23. It says, the self cannot be grasped by scholarship, by the power of the intellect, or by hearing about it from many sources. Only he whom it chooses can understand it. To him does it reveal its identity. So the self is formless. So the question is, how can it be known? This verse provides the answer. You cannot have any idea about the self from studying books. You may have a sharp intellect and may be good at reasoning, yet you still cannot understand the self. And you may hear about the self from many people, but even then it remains a mystery to you. This is not the way you can have a direct knowledge of the self. All these methods may at best give you an indirect conception, but not a direct experience of the self. The self is not an object outside of yourself. It is your inmost being. Because of your ego, this inmost being remains hidden to you. But through years of strict moral disciplines and with the instructions of a competent teacher, the ego fades away. The veil that surrounded your inmost being is then removed. And that inmost being then reveals itself as your own self. Not only that, it reveals itself as the self of all. You feel that you are one with everything and every being. You are all. This experience comes to you as if someone were doing you a favor. Of course, no one is doing you a favor. The self was always within you, but now it has revealed itself to you. You see it now in its true grandeur. This revelation takes place automatically. It comes in a flash. So as we mentioned earlier, that when we speak of the knowledge of God, or the knowledge of Brahman, it's not something that you can get out of books, or out of reasoning, or intellectual studies, because all you're doing then is developing concepts, ideas within the mind. Now, having an idea in the mind is nothing to do with the reality of God. That is something that has to be experienced directly, and it comes through a gradual revelation that comes within yourself. It gradually, God's reality begins to come into your consciousness and unfold more and more within you. So, and this comes generally as a result of meditation. But again, it's not a mental thing. It's not that you get better ideas about God. It's just you feel, oh, there's something here. There's some other reality here, some other thing here that oppresses. That gradually you begin to feel. At first, you may feel that you found your most kind of best friend, your most beloved. And you found something very wonderful that gives you peace and joy and contentment, and you see in your life that this presence starts to kind of unfold, and slowly then you're drawn towards it. And it's as you get drawn towards it, you reach a point where you actually kind of fall into it, where it suddenly, it comes. Like I said, most people, the problem is that this ultimate reality, this ultimate knowledge, it doesn't come as long as the ego is there. And so for most people, this is seems like death to them. That if the ego is threatened, it reacts. Yeah, you remember in the yoga efforts of Patanjali, he said that one of the main obstacles to realization is fear of death. Because when we're faced with this kind of higher consciousness, our little self, our ego, it becomes frightening. It said, no, I'm going to be lost, I'm going to be destroyed. But actually, what happens is, when that little self is, at some point is let go, then the big, infinite, universal ocean, that then comes through. And so, but this is the only way to attain that knowledge, is through direct revelation and direct experience of that reality within yourself. And you mentioned that the self is not an object. See, when we speak of knowledge, and this is kind of in philosophy, Vedanta philosophy, when you speak of knowledge, it's always the knower and the known and the object. There's the object and the experience of the object. In other words, when we know something, it has to be something outside that we see, and then we say, oh yes, I know that. We look outside with our senses, we say, I see that chair, we say, I know that. We look at our mind, and we say, oh, that idea is there in the mind, and we say, oh yes, I know that. But the question is, who knows it? What knows it? And that is very difficult. No matter how high our knowledge of theology and Sanskrit scriptures is, it's all just different ideas in the mind that we can know. We can be highly erudite, we can know so many ideas about God. But the thing we're seeking isn't found in any of those ideas. It's the consciousness which is aware of those ideas. And so this is hard to grasp, something very subtle. And so it makes it very hard for the ordinary person. This is why meditation, all these things are important, because gradually you're shifting your consciousness from physical, you begin inside, and then you become more aware of the mind and all things, mental activities going on, but eventually you're shifted even deeper until you become aware of the consciousness within. But in time, then gradually that reality, that divine reality, that divine self within, gradually, eventually, it becomes a matter of actual experience, a realization. This is called realization. Once that happens, then the person is completely transcended his human existence with its ups and downs. In human life, we experience some pleasure, some joy, some happiness. We also experience some unhappiness and misery and so forth. But when a person attains the experience of this reality, which is infinite, which is eternal, which is infinite bliss, infinite peace, infinite power, then there's no longer any kind of suffering. And because as you realize that self, that inner consciousness as your own self, you then realize that it's also the self in all. And then you feel that you're one with everything and every being. You are all. Now, we may be a very good person. We may consider ourselves to be a very fine person. We just do a lot of good things, we love people, we help people and so on, but we're still a very small person. When we realize that we're everything, we're the whole universe, then whatever kind of joys we're getting out of life, whatever kind of riches or pleasures or power, whatever we're kind of getting in life, then it seems very small in comparison. But we're attracted. Sri Krishna said we're all like children, sitting on the beach playing with different pieces of colored glass, not realizing that within the ocean there's wonderful gems. And so like that, we're on this world with a little bit of money, a little bit of happiness, the Blackhawks win, and now we're all excited, and like that, we're all attached and absorbed in all kinds of little things that are going on, and not realizing that within is the whole vast universal kind of consciousness, which is our own self. And so this is what a person realizes as he approaches it. Usually it will tend to come in stages because we're not ready, but ultimately the thing itself, it comes in a flash. We can have, through meditation, through purifying the mind, we can have kind of higher and higher experiences, experience great peace, great joy, experience kind of occult or exotic, all kinds of experiences, they may come. Gradually, as the mind gets purified, things are getting better. We're becoming happier. We're becoming much more kind of in good shape and so on. But realization, that happens in a flash. It's like either you're asleep or you're awake. As long as, in sleep, in your dream, oh yes, I'm going to heaven, oh yes, I'm having this, I'm doing that. But then you wake up, and now you're awake. There's you're in a whole different reality. And so there's our individual kind of journey where we're getting better and better, gradually improving and so forth. But then realization is like waking up for the whole thing, and now it's there. Now once you are awake, you don't have to work to be awake. You don't have to meditate to be awake. You don't have to do anything. It's just you're awake. And so like that, when a person becomes realized, he's just realized. It's here. That's what he is now. He's awake, and then he sees this world, experiences it in a completely different way. So the revelation, which often seems so far away. When people think about God, often it seems like so far away, and it'll take so long to get there. But in truth, it can actually come at any moment. But what takes time is usually kind of the preparation and getting ready for it, so that it can come. He mentions here that this experience comes to you as if someone were doing you a favor. Now, this is also one of the signs of spiritual experience, is that it seems something that's come by grace. You realize, I didn't do this. I may have been meditating stuff, but I didn't do this. I'm not responsible for this. This has come from something beyond what I can do, beyond what I can do. And there's this great sense of being blessed, of this great sense of that everything is happening by grace. And a person who is surrendered to God, who's made some connection and is kind of living in that consciousness, his whole life becomes just an expression of God's grace. All sense of struggle or worry or stress and everything is gradually replaced by this sense of God is carrying me through one experience after another. And so this is a sense of gratitude, this sense of, yes, I've received something wonderful. And this is a real meaning of humility. When they speak of humility as a virtue, it doesn't mean that you become humble in relation to other people. You don't go around saying, oh, I'm the worst person, I'm a sinner, I'm this and that, I'm not worthy to shine your shoes. And you don't go, that's not humility. The real humility comes when a person, an individual, realizes, oh, I'm in the presence of something very sacred. Something very wonderful is here, and I'm in his presence. So anyway, So anyway, it says that the self was always within you, but now it has revealed itself to you. And you see it now in its true grandeur. This revelation takes place automatically. It comes in the flesh. So now we have just 2 more verses to go. So one who is guilty of this conduct cannot realize the self. The same is the fate of the person whose mind is restless because of his weakness for sense pleasures, who is incapable of controlling his mind, or who is always looking for the fruits of his actions. The only way to attain the self is through knowledge. So then what are the qualities that make one eligible for self-knowledge? First and foremost, you completely abstain from misdeeds. The scriptures tell you that what misdeeds you should abstain from, and you strictly follow the instructions from the scriptures. So the mind has a natural tendency towards sense pleasures, but you have to restrain yourself and turn your mind towards the self. So sense pleasures are transitory. The joy you derive from the contemplation of the self, however, is deep and enduring. Once you taste that joy, sense pleasures cease to attract you. So sense control is the key to spiritual progress. Somehow or other, you have to be your own master. As you progress spiritually, you realize the difference it makes. Spiritual progress is its own reward. So when you live a pure life, you have full control over your mind. Sense pleasures then do not attract you, and you think more of the self and less of the world. Self-knowledge then automatically follows. So the first thing is you have to kind of purify yourself. In other words, if you're cheating people, if you're lying, if you're harming people, then you're creating barriers within your mind that prevents the light from coming. And so first of all, you have to lead an ethical life, and then secondly, you gradually have to focus your attention more on the self than on the sense pleasure. Because as we said at the beginning, and we mentioned before, it's really what you're dealing with is shifting consciousness. The more absorbed you are in the sense pleasures, it means the more your consciousness is material, is physical. The more you're focused on the mind or mental activities, the more your consciousness is mental and intellectual. The more you're focused on the spirit, on God, then the more your consciousness becomes spiritual. Now, if you're busy trying to enjoy the world, trying to enjoy all the pleasures and things you can get, then your consciousness is always centered on the world, and that's what it becomes, a worldly consciousness. On the other hand, when you begin to get centered on the inner presence within, you're seeking kind of the inner divinity, but then gradually that becomes your consciousness. And the world, gradually, it just fades away. It loses its importance. And this is what happens when you find, that's through meditation, when you find that, your meditation, just sitting quietly, just meditating, it's giving you joy, peace, happiness, it's giving you everything you need. Then you say, why do I have to run around and make $1 million? Why do I have to go to the disco? Why do I have to do this? You don't need any of that anymore. It just loses its interest. Basically, you outgrow it. There's a stage in spiritual life that most people go through where they're struggling against temptations. They're drawn towards something higher, but at the same time, they're drawn towards the things of the world, and there's a battle that goes on. But what actually happens is that as you get somewhat established, though, in spiritual, as you begin to grow, then you begin to find that the old attractions, they are actually lose their interest. They don't matter to you anymore. And they actually can become kind of a nuisance. So now we'll come, this is the final verse 25 in the second chapter here. So it says, Brahmins and Kshatriyas are the best among all people, but even they are like food to the self. Death overcomes everyone. Yet even death is a mere condiment for the self. The self is supreme. An ordinary mortal, with his limitations, cannot establish the greatness of the self, at least not the way a self-disciplined person can. And so it says the self is complete, it is supreme. To show how supreme it is, this verse stresses that everything merges in it, as food merges in the body of the eater. The self is unique. It is beyond the reach of our sense organs. There is no way of perceiving it, and it is not possible to define it. It is one without a second, limitless and without attributes. So here ends the second chapter of the first part of the Katha Upanishad. So that brings us, we'll stop here. That brings us to the end of chapter 2. We had chapter 1 with the story of Nachiketa and how he went to the house of the god of death and was given the 3 bows. In chapter 2 then we've had his instructions that Yama, the god of death, gave to Nachiketa. And so, it's going on. Okay. So any questions? Okay. So Swami Varadananda, he's at Ganges right now. There's a retreat going on with Swami Yogananda, and that's a lot of our people that are up at that retreat. So, and then I'll be doing the Sunday talk, because he'll be, after the retreat he goes up to Detroit. So I'll be doing Sunday talk on the inward journey, and then next week I think we'll be back into our regular classes. Tuesday class of Panchamaveda, the Gospel of Shri Krishna, with Swami Varadananda, and then Friday we'll continue with Katha Upanishad, be starting at chapter 3. Om Asato Ma Satyamya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityurma Amritam Gamaya Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. O Lord, and lead us from the unreal to the real. Lead us from darkness to light, and lead us from death to immortality. Peace, peace.